and welcome to a special edition of DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Susan Pettit-Crossman. Today, we'll look at the story of Linda and Becky Till. It's the story of a mother who adopted a child with a disability out of a nursing home, and her struggle to give her all the benefits available to able-bodied children. No one knows better than Linda Till how difficult that fight can be. Linda adopted Becky in 1984 and started a controversial 10-year battle. Our show today takes us from the beginning of the story to its recent conclusion. This story begins in 1974 at a hospital where a baby named Becky was born. Becky was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. In those days, there were not as many options as there are today for a child like Becky. She was made a ward of the state and placed in a nursing home run for profit. It was there that Linda Till discovered Becky. Linda remembers it as if it was yesterday.
I went into the home as a staff person, running what was then termed a pilot project designed to bring developmental programming to kids in these facilities, and they had nothing of the sort in place in these facilities at the time. The conditions in kids' nursing homes at the time were, in my view, very appalling. Basically, nothing was happening for the kids. They were left to simply either lay in their beds or lay on the floor. There was no programming, there was no education going on, no involvement with schools, no physiotherapy, no therapy of any sort, nothing, not even wheelchairs. The kids didn't even have wheelchairs. They didn't have anything. So what I felt very strongly was not only that conditions had to improve for the kids that were in there, but that, in fact, they had to improve so dramatically that kids had to be out of those facilities and they needed to be in families. There were 33 kids in that facility, and there were 16 under 6 that were the kids I was involved with. And Becky made it abundantly clear within 3 days, that she felt that my presence there was for her, period. And she didn't think that anybody else needed to have any of my time. She said, in all kinds of ways, without language, I want you for me. And it didn't take very long to fall in love with her back. Well, when Becky came out of the nursing home, she was really ill. She had been ill for a long time. Her care there had been very poor. Medically, she was in need of a lot of treatment. So the first thing that we did was we had her admitted to Sick Kids Hospital. She went through fairly extensive surgery there and a lengthy hospital stay, about a month.
Well, she was extremely malnourished. She was a 10-year-old girl weighing somewhere around 20 to 22 pounds, if you can imagine that. So she was literally skin and bones and nothing else. So I think it was that she was simply extremely difficult to feed, and the folks looking after her were simply unable to get in enough nutrients to get her to grow.
He's such a rascal.
Becky had an operation to correct digestive problems. Once out of the hospital, she began to prosper and flourish, doing some of the things that all kids like to do.
Good girl, Becky. 1, 2, 3,
When I first met her at 3, she had not yet at that point even smiled. The staff at the time were saying, "Do you think she'll ever learn to smile?" And I say, "Well, she could have something to smile for." When she came out of the hospital, she came home on a weekend, and the first Monday was a Monday in April of 1985. I went to the local school. I called ahead, made an appointment with the principal, went to the local school and said, "We have a child now and we'd like her to go to school." And so I started off talking, as I always do, about Becky, the person we know her to be, personality-wise, character-wise, skills, what she had to bring to any particular situation, and what her needs were, and those include those needs specific to her disability. And then the principal got real nervous. And he said that he would have to discuss it with his superiors, and he would have another meeting with me, get back to me. And we had another meeting the following week, at which he brought several other school board personnel. And at that second meeting, it was made abundantly clear to me, we do not, as a school board, this school board, we do not integrate these children. And they were very clear in their determination to have me understand that under no circumstances would I be successful in convincing them in any way, shape, or form to have her attend the local school, and that their position was that the only way she could get an education was to go back to the nursing home for one, and they would have a teacher available to her in the nursing home. And I just went, you've got to be kidding. I mean, that's as far away from what we were seeking as could possibly be. Send her back to the nursing home that she'd almost died in. And that was their solution to providing her an education.
When we come back, we'll see what happened next as Linda Till tried to enroll Becky in the local public school. Becky and Linda Till live in Sharon, which is in York Region, Ontario. They have 2 children, their son Jordan and Becky, who was adopted. When Linda Till tried to enroll Becky at Sharon Public School, she knew exactly what to expect.
I knew before I attempted to enroll her in the local school that the probability was that the school would say no. They'd been saying no to families with which I had had involvement for years. I knew they were resistant. For a child with a disability to benefit the most, they need to have the most maximal opportunities. Those include the normal and valued experiences that other kids have. The place where the other kids go all day long, the place where the greatest expectations are for the development of children, is that local school. You know, there was no alternative for me. I couldn't say, oh gee, I know the school's unlikely, so I'll just not even bother. For me it was, she has a right to be there. I'm convinced. I know the law. The law is very clear. It says you may not treat differentially a person with a disability simply by virtue of that disability. You may not do it.
That may be the law, but apparently the York Region School Board was not breaking the law. According to the school board, there is a provision in the Ontario Human Rights Code that permits them to opt out of integration where severe cases of disability are concerned. The confrontation continued. The Tills would not give up the fight for Becky's inclusion into the regular school program. The school board, however, once again refused to allow Becky to attend regular classes.
We are seeking an environment where the children speak, where the children can walk and come up to her and initiate interaction.
We don't have a class for Becky here, but she is on a class list at another school.
A regular class is not designed to handle students with handicaps as severe as Becky has, with her inability to communicate, with her inability to walk or move about, and with her inability to be toilet trained at this stage.
She's quite capable of interacting with other people. She's fully toilet trained. I don't know what the hell he's trying to do, but it certainly hasn't anything to do with looking at the child. What he's doing is he's describing to you the kind of child in general that's typically labeled multi-handicapped. He's not talking about Becky. Finally, we agreed upon a compromise, and the compromise was that she would attend a special class in a regular school in the next community. And it was not what we had sought at all, but we had reached a point, and it was well over a year worth of struggle at that point. We'd reached a point where we figured it's clear we're not going to talk them into this. Maybe if we get her in there, we can get them working with us and we can move her to more and more inclusion in regular classes. So we tried it. It didn't work. We continued to make our points there. We continued to be blocked every time around. And finally, in 1988, we filed our complaint with the Human Rights Commission alleging discrimination on the basis of disability. We, being somewhat naive, thought that the Human Rights Commission would act fairly quickly and would recognize that here's an allegation of ongoing abuse of a right. These are years of a child's life that are irretrievable, and they would step in quickly. Within that year, it became abundantly clear that that wasn't going to happen either. We were facing a lengthy process with the Human Rights Commission, so we decided to step up our advocacy battle. I had an awful lot of knowledge about law and legal issues because of my involvement professionally on behalf of people and children, in particular with disabilities. So what I was able to do was activate those resources, those contacts, those networks, and that knowledge, and pull people together. And we decided to bring our case to a very much more public level. So in '89, people may recall seeing us out on the school lawn when she was refused access to the school. That had been 4 years of battle already. Every year, the same thing, refusing to allow her in.
We're going to stay out where people can see that indeed she's being denied access to this school.
This time, there were media there, and they saw her refusing to be allowed in, and we said to the school, we don't think you understood us correctly. We didn't come here to ask you, out of the goodness of your hearts, to let her in and give her an education. We came here to say we believe she has a right to be here, and we've promised her school.
But the board wasn't swayed by the protests, and in the meantime, the prime years for Becky's education were passing. Linda felt that Becky was learning very little at the segregated school. The Tills decided to teach her at home while they continued to push for her integration into the regular school system.
Okay, so can you find the bookshelf? There were many times I was demoralized, you know, and it's sort of the incentive to, you know, pick up the next portion of the battle would be less. I'm not certain that I reached a point where I didn't want to ever go on at all. But that's where our support group was a tremendous hand. I mean, during really intensive periods of struggle, the support group would meet regularly, sometimes once a week, sometimes once a month, and we would meet, and somebody would help me organize that, and we'd have these, you know, meetings where people get together and brainstorm and come up with ideas. And we held rallies, you know, we held rallies of, you know, 900, 1,000 people. We held them all in a number of different places.
I hope that everything you're doing today goes beyond these walls and goes through the province of Ontario, right through the world. So
We had the media involvement, and, you know, we were constantly letting people know what we were going to do. We'd hold press conferences. We had a letter writing campaign, and over 1,200 letters went to the school board. You know, Becky was part of a lot of this, and so she came with me on a couple of conferences. For example, to Prince Edward Island, there was an association, Canadian Association for Community Living, held a national conference there. Becky came and participated in the advocacy campaign for herself. Skill building to becoming a self-advocate, you know, and this is, you know, these were important developments for her. Becky is a young person who has a number of clearly defined rights, a number of clearly defined abilities, and a number of clearly defined needs. And I, as her parent, have an obligation to enable her to meet every single one of her goals and her needs that I can possibly arrange. And one of those happens to be knowing what's going on in her world, understanding how to cope with that, and skill building around how to manage for that in the future.
Back in 1988, Linda Till filed a complaint with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. It stated that Becky was being discriminated against by the York Board of Education because of her disabilities. It was not until March of 1993 that the Commission's Board of Inquiry got underway. Linda Till's legal battle to have Becky attend classes at her local school was finally in progress.
You come into hearings like this, you got to try to convince the people empowered to make the decision. Is it better for a child to be with normal children or not? And then what we're saying is the judges all over our country are saying, yeah, it's better.
I think nobody understood how big an issue this really was, and how big an issue, how broadly it would need to be addressed. And in order to do that, it took an awful lot more time than anybody had estimated in the original, you know, planning around days that they would set aside for this.
And would you just peruse the bottom of this first page and over the top of the second page?
At the point at which we left the hearing, we were looking at the possibility of more days being added on, probably in the fall of '94, which would mean that the hearing had extended for 2 solid years from the time of the inquiry being called.
It's a really big risk to deprive a child the opportunity to grow up with interacting with normal children.
What happened was that we completed our case, and the Board of Education had begun to present their case. They had offered to settle with us several times, and they made that settlement offer right near Christmas time. '93, we sort of worked on fine-tuning little things through the Christmas holidays, and at hearing dates in January, we signed agreements. So in the settlement, the board makes a statement in support of a policy statement in support of integration, identifying integration as a worthy goal for students with exceptionalities, and specifies that that refers to placement in the regular class in the neighborhood school if at all possible, and I'm prepared to accept that at certain times there may be reasons why a neighborhood school is not possible. They also spelled out a policy statement that recognized that parental input is a critical factor in both placement and program development for students with exceptionalities. That's a major change for this board, and a positive message for other families who have strong convictions about integration for their child.
You want that one? Or that one?
The Tills pulled Becky out of school for only 1 year during the whole process. In 1990, she was welcomed by the fully integrated Catholic school system. Becky, who is now 20 years old, attends high school at Sacred Heart.
We had made it clear we were keeping her at Sacred Heart. We wanted her to remain at Sacred Heart. We're happy with her at Sacred Heart. But we wanted some guarantees that should she need to leave Sacred Heart for any reason, she would be able to move into the public system and be fully integrated, and that is in place in the settlement. Becky is guaranteed regular class placement in a local high school with the supports that she needs if she needs to leave Sacred Heart, and the public system is paying for Becky's education in the separate system, and they are paying for her transportation to the separate system. And all of that is detailed in the settlement.
The settlement also paid Becky $15,000 and acknowledged that the integration of exceptional pupils into local community schools, preferably in their neighborhood, is a worthy goal. In return, Till withdrew the discrimination complaint before the Ontario Human Rights Commission.
I really don't see that this issue is over, but I do believe that we won. I do believe it's abundantly clear in, just simply reading through the issues on the settlement, the statements in the settlement. There's, multiple factors, all of which are where we wanted them to go and move forward to. There could have been more, but there are simply too many issues to try and struggle with for it to have been able to be proceeded with on this case. So the next case and the next case and the next case will have to be a part of the whole thing of bringing about a major systems change.
So, Linda Till thinks that she won, but so too does the York Region Board of Education. They refuse to admit any wrongdoing or acts of discrimination. But by taking Becky's case to the Human Rights Commission, Linda Till feels she has set an example. School boards must now think in terms of negative public opinion, as well as lengthy court battles, if they decide against the integration of other children like Becky Till. When we come back, the implications the settlement might have on other young people with disabilities. The case of Becky Till and York Region School Board cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to reach what might be called a technical draw. That money could have been spent on upgrading facilities for the integration of disabled students. That wasn't done. What then was accomplished? And how will it help others like Becky Till?
Yes, they have said this is a worthy goal for students with exceptionalities. But no, they haven't said we guarantee this for all students with exceptionalities. haven't said that, you see. So it's sort of, this is a step. This settlement is a major development for a school board that came from where we were with them. It's a major step forward. It's something for parents and other kids to hang their hat on. It's something for other school boards to look to and say, wow, if that school board, the most resistant one to integration in all of Canada, certainly has been perceived that way, if this school board is actually prepared to make settlements with statements of that sort in them, there is going to be a disincentive for them to proceed to fighting the next family down the road. It's a step, but it is not a total resolution, and we need to be able to make ourselves clear. We won't go away. The other families aren't going to go away. We're not prepared to lose under any circumstances, whatever it takes to get our kids the rights that they have not had given to them, that have been abused all this time, we will do. I've had some contact with and some calls from a couple of parents who have been seeking an integrated placement for their kids within the school board, and they have called and said that, you know, we got it. They're willing to give it to us. They weren't willing to give us to us before. If they were willing to discuss it with us at all, they weren't making any promises. Now they're saying we've got it, and they'll give it. We'll have the regular neighborhood school, regular class for our kid, and you know, we know two families were indicating that they were informed that it was very clearly something that, you know, was directly attributable to Becky's case. The other family had not been informed that specifically, but was completely convinced that it was very attributable to Becky's case.
Probably the most significant factor buried in all of this is how well able-bodied children react to children who have a disability.
And if you land directly on a person, you can send them back.
I mean, our experience with Becky has been very specific on that. She's been included in all kinds of things, and you know, brownies and Girl Guides and Pathfinders and church youth group and swimming lessons and, you know, dances and you name it. The kids have been unanimous in supporting her, and in fact, we have to fight them off. We say 3 kids pushing a wheelchair is too many, and you know, she doesn't need to be helped for everything. She can do some of it herself, so hold back. You know? But I mean, if we take her, she has an electric wheelchair that she uses and likes to take off down the street. And if we take her out, you can be sure there will be a swarm of kids. And if she's out and she has a hiking cart and we go off traipsing through the fields, there's a gang of kids all around. If she's out in the backyard playing in the swing set or in the pool or, you know, you name it, whatever, she's out doing it. She's like a magnet. They like to be with her. One kid was asked one time, why do you like being with Becky so much? Because she laughs a lot. She's fun to be with.
That's the story of the Tills and their struggle. Their efforts have spanned a decade. They've seen the closing of profit-making foster homes, and they've continued to advocate for the rights of children with disabilities in the school system. That's our show. DNET will be preempted for sports for the month of March, but we'll be back in April. In the meantime, keep in touch. If you have any thoughts about today's program, we'd like to hear from you. I'm Susan Pettit-Crossman. Now, here's our address. Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W 1E6. That's the Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station A, Toronto, M5W 1E6. Or you can fax us at 416-205-3399. This program is brought to you in part by the Centre for Independent Living in Toronto and the Canadian Association of Independent Living Centres.